Hi there, thanks for joining us. Today I'm delighted to be able to share with you a bottle of Pouilly-Fuisse from one of Burgundy's leading producers of white wine, Domaine Leflaive. This is the 2019 vintage of that. Leflaive have made their reputation and are based up and around Puligny-Montrachet, where the family claim they've lived since 1717 is the date they give on their website. The domain was actually founded in 1905 by Joseph Leflaive, and he bought at a time when phylloxera had ravaged the vineyards of Burgundy, and was able to buy some really quite fantastic Grand Cru vineyards, but had to then pretty much replant them all. 2 generations on, the domain is taken over in 1990 by 2 cousins, his grandchildren, Anne-Claude and Olivier. 4 years later, Olivier moves on to create his own very successful negociant business, and Anne-Claude very much takes the domain in the direction of being one of the leading advocates of biodynamic winemaking. And produces some absolutely fantastic wines. I think it's fair to say that amongst Burgundy's white wines, Domaine Leflaive is normally producing some of the most rich and opulent wines from the appellations it works with. So yeah, wines that are very very sought after and can command some very high prices. I mean, the Grand Crus that they have will range in price from sort of $1,000 or $2,000 up to $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 for the Puligny-Montrachet. Some of that based on scarcity, but also because these wines are very compelling and there's a lot of demand for them. Unfortunately, Anne-Claude died in 2015, and the estate has been taken over by her nephew, Bryce de la Morandière, and he's continued to maintain the quality and the reputation of the domain. In more recent years, the domain has branched out a little. They now have some wines they make in partnership with other growers, so that they've moved from being almost entirely making white wines. They now have some partnership wines they make with producers in the Côte de Beaune. Other changes: in 2013 they produced their first vintage of Pouilly-Fuisse. And yes, they own vineyards there. They've got 2.7 hectares of vineyards in the Pouilly-Fuisse appellation in Soutre-Pouilly, and that quite a complex arrangement there. They've got 14 different plots that go into this wine, but on really good south-facing chalk slopes. So excellent conditions for producing really good Chardonnay. I'm not sure about this particular vintage, but I know certainly the first 3 or 4 vintages, they were pressing the fruit in Verzy and tankering it up to Puligny-Montrachet to make the wine there. So the wine was being made in exactly the same conditions as the wines from Puligny-Montrachet. So a nice opportunity to try the style of the domain without having to pay the thousands of dollars for the Grand Cru wines. They're fabulous Grand Cru wines. So what about the winemaking here? As I say, the winemaking is biodynamic, or the viticulture is biodynamic, but I'm sure that those practices follow into the winery as well. This wine ferments in oak barrel. There's a split of sort of 50-50 large and small oak, and that's split so that there is Vosges oak makes the larger barrels and Allier the smaller, so they're capturing the characteristics of the different oaks in there. So the wine ferments in barrel with ambient yeasts. It then stays in those barrels for a year with lees stirring to add richness and to protect the fruit from oxidation. The wines are then blended or combined. It's all Chardonnay, so there's no actual varietal blending. So they're combined in tank, and they stay in tank for 6 months to harmonise and settle together before they're bottled. I think these are wines which, you know, given their concentration, they will usually age very well. So let's see what this wine's showing us here. Firstly, the colour. You've got a medium yellow. It's not particularly intense. It's not heading towards gold. When I swill it, yes, there are some tears forming fairly readily there. The label says this is 13.5% alcohol, and I'm expecting it to be a very concentrated wine. So it's not surprising that it's got quite good vinosity. Let's see what the nose has to show us. The main thing to realise about the nose is that it's wonderfully harmonious. I'm going to describe aromas separately, but actually they're all combined beautifully there. Initially I get a real ripeness, sort of as if it's tropical pineapple fruit, and that sort of opens a little, and it becomes more sort of ripe white peach, perhaps towards an apricot-y, a little riper than the peach. But layered over that and actually melded into it, there are notes of creaminess, of butterscotch, rich, attractive butterscotch, vanilla. There are toasty notes. There's a very slight high note of a fermentation aroma there, so sort of giving a sort of slightly flinty, but actually the way it's lifted, it becomes in combination with the fruit, it gives an almost olive blossom, sort of almond blossom note. Not sure what olive blossoms do. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's got nice intensity, and yeah, very interesting aromas there. So let's have a taste. On the palate, there's really good intensity. Again, it starts with that sort of tropical pineapple, maybe mango sort of note, which is rich, but then the mid palate is much more the sort of the stone fruit, the white peach, and maybe slightly riper apricot notes. And by the mid palate, again, you're seeing that sort of creaminess. There's the butterscotch. There are tiny toasty touches. I'm not seeing the vanilla in the same way. It's more integrated there. But another thing that's really good about this is the freshness of the wine. It's got good acidity, so I'm tasting a creamy note on the middle of my tongue, but at the sides I'm salivating slightly. It's still mouth-watering, and that mouth-watering note carries on to the finish. The fruit is concentrated on the mid-palate and is quite rounded at the end, and the finish carries on because of the acidity, and that's where you've got sort of little hints of toast, spice and almond blossom that last very well in the mouth. I suspect as the wine ages, possibly the fruit will lengthen, and you'll see a more complex finish, but as it is, it has nice length. This is a real quality wine and a nice insight into the sort of richness and opulence you get with Domaine Leflaive's wines. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found this interesting, and do watch again. Bye now.